Okay, have you ever been in this situation? Someone tells you they've got like serious feelings for you, but, and here's the catch, you're not so sure if you feel the same way back.
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one. What do you even do in that situation?
Right. Do you try and see if those feelings will grow or just be straight up honest, even if it might hurt them? It's a real dilemma. Luckily, there's this podcast, Love and Return, and they did a whole episode on this. It's called To Love or Not to Love Back.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and we thought we'd take a deep dive into their episode, see what insights we could uncover.
Definitely a topic worth exploring. There's so much to unpack there.
So much. And one of the first things they talk about on the episode is, well, how do we even define love? I mean, it's not just one thing, right?
For sure.
Is it romantic? Is it the kind of love you have for family, friends?
Exactly.
Like, why does it even matter to define it in this situation?
Well, because each type of love, it comes with, its own set of expectations, things that it means. Romantic love, for example, usually you think of intimacy, making a commitment, maybe even spending your lives together.
Right. Totally different from how you love your mom or your best friend.
Huge difference. It's like, I don't know, are we having pizza tonight or are we signing a mortgage? Two very different levels of commitment there.
Uh-huh, exactly. So knowing what kind of love we're even talking about, that's kind of step one before you can figure anything else out.
Absolutely. Otherwise, you're just stumbling around in the dark.
Okay, so let's say at IS romantic love. Someone's told you how they feel. You're flattered, maybe even kind of curious. The podcast made a pretty good argument for at least considering if you could love them back. Seeing if anything could develop.
Yeah, they talk about how strong mutual love can be. It can give you this deep connection, someone to support you, that sense of belonging, the intimacy we all kind of crave.
It's like that feeling of, I don't know, really being seen and understood.
Totally. It's powerful stuff.
But before we all run off and fall head over heels, they also brought up some things to be careful about. Like, what if you feel like you should reciprocate out of obligation, not because you actually have those feelings?
Yeah, then they call that an obligation-based relationship, basically leading to resentment down the road.
Oh, that sounds rough.
Yeah, imagine going on dates doing all the coupley things when you don't really want to, just because you feel like you should.
Oof, talk about setting yourself up for a bad time.
It's like, yeah, building a house on a foundation of sand. Eventually, the whole thing crumbles. You end up presenting the person, they get hurt because they realize it's not genuine. No one wins.
So how do you avoid that whole mess? The podcast talked a lot about knowing your own values and like where you're at in life, your timing.
It's not just about the other person, right? It's about you, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if they're ready to jump in, you have to ask, am I really in a place for this? What do I want? What's important to me in a relationship?
Because ignoring those things, that can really backfire later on.
Big time. You end up making choices you regret.
They actually shared stories from listeners who'd been in these situations.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
One was about this person who tried to make themselves love their best friend back. They thought it was the right thing to do, but it didn't work out, obviously.
Absolutely, it did not. And it just shows you being self-aware, being honest with yourself, that's really important.
So important. And it's not just about protecting yourself. It's about being fair to the other person, too. Giving them a chance to find someone who truly feels the same way.
Definitely. And the podcast had a relationship expert on, and their advice was all about being open and honest in your communication, which makes sense, right?
Totally.
I mean, emotions are running high. Things can get misinterpreted so easily.
Especially when you're trying to, not hurt the other person's feelings.
Exactly. But what if trying to protect them ends up backfiring? Like they think you're developing feelings too because you're not being upfront.
Oh, that would be bad. So much worse than just having that tough conversation in the first place.
Yeah, honesty, even when it's hard, is the best way to avoid more hurt feelings down the line.
Yeah, it's like ripping off a Band-Aid. Might sting a little at first, but it's better than letting the wound get infected.
Totally. But it's funny, right? We talk about love like it's this magical thing. You get hit by Cupid's arrow and boom, you're in love.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Love at first sight, all that.
Exactly. But then this whole thing about should you love someone back, that makes it seem like there's a choice involved.
Interesting point. It's true. The podcast did talk about that a bit. About how love can grow over time.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Like maybe you start as friends. Or maybe you're just drawn to someone's personality at first and then, who knows, romantic feelings develop.
So maybe not always love at first sight. Maybe more like love at, I don't know, 10th sight.
Uh-huh, exactly. But that just makes things more complicated.
Right. Because if love isn't always this spontaneous thing, this feeling that just hits you, then what happens when the other person is already there and you're not? How do you
Yeah.
deal with that? That's a really good question. And I don't think there's an easy answer. It's definitely more nuanced than just, oh, I should try to love them back.
Totally agree. Makes you think. Maybe the better question is like, how do you respond when you know someone loves you, but you don't feel the same way?
Yeah, much better question. And that's where communication, honesty, those things become even more important.
Because even if you can't force yourself to fall in love with them romantically, you can still acknowledge their feelings.
Mm.
Be respectful.
Right. It's about being kind, even when what you're saying might be hard to hear.
Exactly. And you know what? Sometimes being honest like that can actually lead to a different kind of relationship.
Oh, totally.
Maybe not romantic love, but a strong friendship. Or maybe it helps both people move on, find relationships that are a better fit.
Definitely. And remember, the podcast host talked about that too. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is to let them go.
Oh, yeah. If you know it's not going to work, holding on just makes things harder for everyone.
Makes it harder to find someone who will truly reciprocate those feelings.
Thinking back on everything we've talked about today, I don't know about you, but love just seems like such a powerful force.
Oh, for sure.
It can create incredible happiness and connection, but it can also, well, lead to a lot of pain if it's not handled carefully.
Absolutely. It's powerful, no doubt about it.
Right.
Which is why I think it's so important to be thoughtful, to use both our hearts and our heads.
Totally. Compassion is important, but you also have to be aware of your own needs, what you want.
It's a balancing act.
Yeah.
But that's also what makes these conversations so important.
Mm.
Talking about all this stuff, it helps us figure out how to navigate these situations in our own lives.
Exactly. Open communication, self-awareness, really understanding where the other person is coming from. These are the things that help us build healthy relationships, both romantic and, with friends and family.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Hmm?
And honestly, that's what we all want, right?
Right. So we hope this deep dive has not only given you information, but also made you feel a little more in control. Like, hey, these situations are tough, but you can handle them.
And don't forget, it's okay to ask for help if you need it. Talking to friends, family, a therapist, it can make a huge difference.
As much as I love a good love story, I also think there's something really powerful about being honest about your feelings, even when it's hard.
For sure. It takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable like that,
Mhm.
to say, this is how I really feel.
And that honesty, that authenticity, I think that's actually the foundation of a truly strong relationship. Any relationship, really.
I couldn't agree more. So much better than pretending or, trying to be someone you're not.
So, deep divers. Today, we've talked about defining different types of love, what it means to love someone back, how important timing is, and how being open and honest in your communication can help avoid a lot of heartache.
We've covered a lot of ground. And like we said, there's no easy answers when it comes to this stuff.
But hopefully you're walking away feeling a bit more prepared. Like you have some tools to help you figure things out because, hey, we're all in this together, right? It's okay to walk away from this and still have questions. I mean, that's kind of how these deep dives usually go, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Like
Yeah.
peeling back the layers of an onion, right?
Yeah.
There's always something else underneath. The more we learn about love, the more we realize how much we don't know.
Aha, so true. Like the deeper you dive, the deeper it gets.
But that's what keeps it interesting. Imagine if we had all the answers already. That'd be kind of boring, wouldn't it?
Super boring. So, okay, on that note, we want to leave you with one final thought. It's something the podcast touched on, but didn't really explore.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
Remember how we talked about love not always being a choice?
Yeah, sometimes it just hits you.
It does.
Sure.
So here's the thing. If love isn't always a choice, how do we handle it when someone loves us but we don't feel the same?
Ooh, that's a good one. How do you balance being true to yourself with, not wanting to hurt the other person?
Exactly. It's tough because you don't want to lead them on, right? Give them false hope, but you also don't want to just shut them down completely.
Right. You want to be honest, but also kind.
Exactly. It's like, how do you find that balance?
And the podcast actually gave us a framework for that. Remember, open communication.
Right. Even if it's hard, having those conversations is always better than avoiding them.
Absolutely. Bottling things up just makes everything worse.
And who knows, maybe that honest conversation will lead to something you hadn't even thought of. Maybe a strong friendship comes out of it.
It could. Or maybe it helps everyone move on. Find relationships that are a better fit.
The important thing is to approach it all with empathy, to really listen and try to find a solution that works for everyone.
Well said. And on that note, a huge thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it, insightful, interesting, maybe even helpful in your own life.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in and engaging with us. And until next time, remember to keep diving deep. When it comes to love, there's no right or wrong answer. Just be true to yourself, listen to your gut, and always, always communicate.